artist statements right now for the purposes of this. And so the artist statement should paint a clear picture of who you are as an artist, what your creative work is all about, and your artistic experience. So let's let that sink in for a second. Your artist statement should be brief and impactful. So what do I mean by brief? 250 to 500 words. That is not a super long piece of writing. 1,000 words is way too much, especially when you're filling out an application. Keep in mind that people are reading dozens of applications. So that's the max. And what do I mean by impactful? Your unique creative perspective. So that's some of the stuff I was talking about a little earlier. How is what you're doing really different? Oh, thank you. So real quick, I'm going to go through, there's a couple of different types of artist statements that, you might encounter or you might think about writing. So the first one is for a single work. So you've done, you've created a sculpture, let's say, or you've created a dance, and you want to make a statement just about that single piece. That would be an artist statement. And that would get to that philosophy piece. This is really about the philosophy. This is not a thing where you're telling all of the things you've done forever and ever. And so for a body of work, so a series or something that you've put together, you're showing to the public. So there's that kind, and then there's a third kind, which is the one we're really going to talk about today, which is your overall creative practice. So often when you're completing applications, they're not asking you for a real deep dive on one particular series. Sometimes they are, sometimes places are, but often they really want to get this kind of overall rounded picture of who you are as an artist and who you are as a creative. So these are some things, and this is really getting into the mindset of writing an artist statement. And I will say that these are things that I personally do, and I know that other artists personally do, when you really want to take the time to construct something like this. So get away from distractions. So don't do this in a time when you're trying to also work on your laptop, or you're trying to, feed a child or something. To really take that specified time for yourself, even if it's like an hour, Take a mental inventory. So sometimes I forget how much stuff I do as a creative, as an artist. And I'm like, I haven't been making anything. I haven't been doing anything. And then when I sit there and I'm like, oh, well, I've done this. I have done that. Oh, yeah, I had work up over there. So when you really stop and take stock of where have I had performances in the last, year, you realize sometimes how much you've actually been doing. And what am I communicating? So this is really about how I'm talking to others about my creative work, and what am I saying through the things that I'm creating. So this is we might get into this in another slide, but this is really talking about similarities between different pieces of work that you've created. Oftentimes there's a thread, there's a through line. So we are going to get into that in a second, in the next slide, in fact. So this idea of themes in your creative work. Sometimes we think we're doing isolated things. I'm just doing this one performance, or I'm just making this one object, or I'm just hosting this one workshop, or, this is like these isolated things. When you start to look at things holistically over a timeline, over a history of what you've been doing as a creative, a lot of times you're going to see things rise to the surface. Similarities. What am I getting at? What am I communicating as a creative person to people? Am I talking about myself a lot? Am I talking about my personal experiences? Am I talking about things that I see in my environment? Am I talking a lot about trauma, like V said? Sometimes it's hidden, sometimes it's really obvious. But look for some of those themes. So look wide and deep, like I was saying. So look across that history of your creative time as a human on the earth. find connections, and ask questions. Really ask yourself, what am I saying? What is my work saying? How is it saying what it's saying? And this is really talking about vulnerability. So talking about your creative work openly, and I think this is why a lot of times people really struggle with writing an artist statement, is because it takes vulnerability. It is really scary to go in front of a bunch of people or a funder or a host, a jury or whoever, even if it's in your writing, and talk really plainly about what you're doing. Because oftentimes what we're doing as creatives is really personal. It's really personal. And when you're saying it, you're saying this super personal thing to someone, and you're setting yourself up for someone to tell you no or that's wrong. It's very scary. But the more you do it, the more comfortable you become with that practice of vulnerability. And just, Veronica looks like she wants to say something.
It's hard to be vulnerable. I am not comfortable in my vulnerability sometimes, and as a writer, I suck at trying to write my own artist statement, even still to this day. The first time my book came out, it took me at least a year to figure out what it was I wanted to convey to people about what I was trying to say. It took a while. And it took getting feedback from other people to really understand, like, I was just venting. So I wasn't looking. And as an artist, you just get to doing. You know what I'm saying? You don't know what you're putting out there because it's coming from a deep place. But for myself, I know it came down to, I was just saying, look beyond the surface. Nothing is what it seems. And it took other people to help me find that. And like I said, it took about a year. And I got 2 books. So it's not easy. And even still, when people ask me about myself as a writer, I fumble. I kind of, because I don't know what I'm about to write about now, because I'm all over the place talking about different things at different times. So it's okay to not know, but it helps to get some feedback from other people so you can find a direction and start getting a little bit comfortable in your vulnerability. You may not ever be all the way comfortable, but you can get comfortable enough to talk about it.
Just a practical point about kind of the previous note that I made about how proposal is a work in progress, and having that document. Artist statement is the same thing. I can trace a line between the artist statement that I would use now and artist statement that I wrote for the first time, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago. And just realizing that this is, you constantly improving, you constantly working on it, and having it over there. And then you can be, I don't know, riding a bus, and then you have an idea, you make a note of it, and then you go back to the document, you change it, and it stays there. So having this as a work in progress, but also another point that I found important, there is a connection between the artist statement and the proposal that you're going to write and the job application that you're going to write with the letter of intent or whatever that's going to be. So when you have that work in progress that you work on for a while, you will have ideas formulated, and then you will use them in the proposal, in job applications, and all of those things.
Yeah, it is. If you start to look at it as a really personal piece of writing rather than just something you have to do to fulfill an application requirement, it takes on another kind of purpose for you as a creative. My work, and I'll just mention quickly since we've had this, because this is a really, really important part of this, is intensely personal. And it's taken me years to start talking about, because these things they're really personal for me. I have mental health disorders. I have chronic health issues that deal with female reproductive disorders. Like, those are really intense personal things, but talking about them over and over again in this writing has allowed me to, access and tap into that vulnerability. So I'm really comfortable talking about those things now. So this is important. This goes back to language. Big words don't make your artist statement better. Some of the best artist statements I've ever read use extremely plain language. And we're going to take a look at a couple of examples, too, of people's artist statements. But yes, I think oftentimes, will you hit the next button? Yeah. So academic language isn't really necessary. Using these kind of like lofty terms or like, you know, I don't know, really ephemeral concepts in your artist statement does not make it, you know, a better one as compared. It's not wrong. If you want to do that, that's completely fine. But I think often people think that they have to do that, and that's not true. So again, back to this idea of telling your creative story. Who are you? Who are you as a creative? And everybody's favorite, focus on clarity. You know, it's the same as a proposal. You can kind of really get lost in there. And, you know, while artistic, you know, concepts in general can be sort of, you know, you have to make inferences. Unlike what View was saying with the proposal, you don't want to make inferences. Sometimes you do in an artist statement, but there should still be a you know, a nice package when you're done with that piece of writing.
Don't go down the rabbit hole. It's very easy to do.
So here are 2 samples of artist statements, and I'm just going to take a minute and let folks read these. I can read a little excerpt out loud. They're a little bit long, so I'm just going to take like 1 minute and let you all read that. Okay, so any thoughts about this piece of writing right off the rip? Again, like I said, this is not wrong. There's no wrong artist statements, but this is a little bit hard to follow. There are some things in there. Such a setup instantiates the complex and often seemingly chaotic subject. If you have a hard time saying the word out loud, that's a thought. That's a key. That's something to sort of note mentally. Okay, so here's the next one. No. Okay, any thoughts about this one?
Oh, it's much more personal and descriptive.
You know what this person is, you know what their medium is. They're a painter. That you know the techniques that they use. The previous one, I was unsure about what their medium was or what they were creating.
I only saw some guidelines specifying in which person you want to write the description once.
I see it a lot as a writer. As a writer, I see it come up a lot. It says you want to write your artist statement. They want it in third person, just like when I'm writing my bio, they want it in third person. It just depends on the opportunity and what they're asking for. Just make sure you read those guidelines, because that's what's going to tell you how to format it.
This is a question that I have gotten before. Is an artist statement a biography? It isn't. That's the short answer is no, it's not. Artist statements about your creative philosophy. A lot of artist statements do include some, information about your, history or some accolades or some things like that. But the artist statement really isn't a place where you're going to give a full dissertation about, everything you've done in your career. It's that succinct philosophy statement and what you're talking about, what you're communicating. So if you are going to include some of those artistic experiences, though, in your artist statement, often it's just a couple of sentences. These are some of the things that you might want to include. Where you went to school, any training, any degrees you've gotten, certifications, things like that. Or if you didn't go to school, a lot of times I see, I'm self-taught. I didn't go to art school. Recent creative engagements that you're proud of. So, again, not your entire, creative history or litany of everything you've ever done. Just, I am recently a recipient of the Special Flower Award or something like that. And then again, okay, so awards, accolades, recent grants. And then resume and CV. Is the artist statement the same as the resume and CV? No, it isn't. So an artist statement is a very special piece of writing that is not a bio, it's not a resume, it's not a CV. A resume, everybody, you pretty much know what that is. That's something that you're submitting to employers. That's something to show your qualifications and your work experience. And a CV or an artist CV, curriculum vitae, this can take on multiple forms, but I'm speaking specifically about an artist CV. This is where, if you want to list off every single exhibition or every single performance you've ever done in your entire life, put it in your CV. Don't put it in your artist statement. Or put it not even your bio. Usually bios are really succinct pieces of writing too. Put that stuff in a CV.
Example, artist statement, bio, and a proposal, and some other, and I see the same information duplicated, it's a bad thing. So make sure that each piece of writing that you're submitting is doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing. So to the point of that statement is not your CV and not your bio. And I do see these things when I read a bio and I see part of artist statement. Kind of, it's a sign of laziness, but also it doesn't give me the information that I seek as a funder. This is your presentation of yourself as an artist. Why are you doing your art? What the art that you do to people or to you. It's really description focused on your art. Bio is the description of your professional trajectory. I started here and I studied this, and then I went to do that, and I had this list of exhibitions and this list of awards and this kind of job.
You don't have to have a long history. Whenever you get started is when you get started. If you're making art, then that's when you start. It doesn't go backwards. You have examples of that is better than saying I just did it. No, where is the proof? So if you have proof you've been making it, that's your credential.